Is there an issue?
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 53 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people.
Pursuant to the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, June the 13th, 2022, and Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, the committee's meeting on the study of Hockey Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format and pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June the 23rd, 2022, members are sitting in person and some are remotely using the Zoom application. I want to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And for those participating in the video conference, click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen to activate your mic. And please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either English or French. And of course, you will see a little globe, and that is your interpretation button. So you can click there. Those in the room, you know that you can use the mics to tell you how to do so in the desired channel. Now, reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And I just wanted to also ask the clerk one question. Is everyone mic'd with the House of Commons approved mic, please? Because as you know, we have had some problems in the past with accidents.
Yes, Dr. Frey.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to begin to the meeting. And as we see today on the meeting, we have representatives of Hockey Canada, and it's Hockey Canada, Pat McLaughlin, Senior Vice President, and he is on by video conference, and the Oilers Entertainment Group, Bob Nicholson, Chairman of Hockey Canada, who's also there by video conference. And so we will begin, and I just wanted to let the witnesses know that you each have 5 minutes to present. I will give you, I will shout out, literally, I will shout out when you have 30 seconds left so that you can wind up. And if you haven't finished, we'll be able to in the question and answer to be able to say what you need to say. And so we will begin, starting with Pat McLaughlin, Senior Vice President of Hockey Canada, for 5 minutes, please, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting me to take part in this important study today. I want to start by recognizing the serious calls for change that have come from the members of this committee, from the government, from our members, our sponsors, and most importantly, all Canadians. The fact that this is the fourth time for Hockey Canada to appear before this committee, I can tell you is certainly not lost on me. We have heard you. Hockey Canada must change, and it must do so urgently. Canadians expect and deserve meaningful action, and our organization, quite honestly, has been too slow to act. I hope that Canadians will see that we're putting in place the necessary changes required to regain their trust. This past summer, we outlined a comprehensive action plan to address systemic issues in our sport, and we are making progress. We said that we would reopen the independent investigation into the alleged sexual assault of 2018, and we have. We said we would implement mandatory violence and consent training for our national teams, and we have. We said we would commission an independent full governance review, and we have. We said that we would become a full signatory to the OSIC, and we have. And we also said that we'd create a new independent third-party complaint mechanism, and we've done that as well. At the same time, we recognize that there's need to make room for leadership change. As this group knows, and Canadians know, our entire board has resigned, and our CEO recently departed Hockey Canada. Without question, we are in a significant transition phase. On December 17th, we will be joined by a new board of directors, and that board of directors will be identified by a nominating committee that's independent. I feel confident that I can speak for all of our staff and for our members when I say that we're looking forward to this new leadership, the fresh ideas and perspectives they'll bring in order to help move our organization forward. Today, to assist this group, the committee, with their questioning, I want to provide some brief background on my role at Hockey Canada. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy, Operations, and Brand, and I oversee a number of key areas within Hockey Canada. Some of those areas include business planning, the development of our strategic plan and the execution of that plan, general operations, marketing and branding, and alignment. I will answer all your questions today to the best of my ability, and it's important to note at the same time that anything to do with respect to Hockey Canada finances, safe sport initiatives, and legal matters are not within my current job scope. I also want to point out as well that I joined Hockey Canada in the fall of 2018 after the alleged incident that had occurred. I've had no involvement in the handling of the incident. I've had no involvement in the settlement discussions, and I only first became aware of the incident in May of this year. As I wrap up, Madam Chair, I just want to touch on a couple quick things. Our organization has made mistakes, and our failure to act sooner has had a significant toll on children, a significant toll on parents and volunteers, and I can tell you that we're deeply sorry for that. I want to be clear on this as well, and to make no mistake, without those folks, there is no Hockey Canada. There is no Hockey Canada. Making it right for our organization has had a heavy financial, a heavy organizational, and an emotional cost. And our organization has also placed significant strain on our members. But I can also tell you that we are very optimistic for the future. We are listening. We've clearly heard the calls for us to do better, and we are working and accountable to rebuild the organization. But I'm going to be honest as I wrap up, we need the help of this group. It's a sincere comment. We do not have all the answers, nor do we profess to. It's my hope that we can work in a collaborative nature, work as a team as we move forward. And with the help of this committee, we can work together to make hockey a safer sport for all of those involved, both on and off the ice. And with that, I thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. I'll now go to Bob Nicholson, Mr. Nicholson from the Oilers Entertainment Group, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bob Nicholson. I served as President and CEO of Hockey Canada from 1998 to 2014. I'll do my best to address your questions regarding my time there. Let me say up front that the allegations about the incident at the 218 Gala and at the 203 World Junior Tournament are an outrage. That kind of conduct has no place in our game or our society. I hope both cases are investigated fully and that justice is done. When I was CEO of Hockey Canada, I led an effort by our organization to improve player safety and prevent abuse of the kind we saw involving Graham James. And the terrible experiences Sheldon Kennedy and others bravely shared with us. Sheldon's testimony and those of the other victims demanded a real reckoning for our sport. I believe we made progress, becoming one of the first national sport organizations to work with the Respect Group, beginning with programs aimed at coaches, officials, trainers, administrators, and later growing to involve parents and players. I'm grateful that I'm still close with Sheldon and the others that were involved at that time. I'm proud of the progress we made. It is clear that we didn't go nearly far enough, particularly regarding off-ice conduct. It is perhaps the failure to see that then that brings us here today. As a sport, we all have a lot more work to do to ensure that we have a culture in hockey where everyone feels safe and welcome. This will require commitment and real action, not just nationally, but at the regional and provincial levels as well. I'm hopeful that the work that Hockey Canada is currently doing, as well as the efforts that this committee and others, will make the game safer for everyone involved. During my time as CEO, Hockey Canada's role was to develop and deliver programs to its 13 member branches across Canada. These branches are regional governing bodies that operate with their own volunteers and boards to deliver programs to over 600,000 youth across Canada. As CEO, I had 3 priorities. My first priority was safety. We had to make the game much safer on the ice and address things like hitting from behind. The game was suffering and a collective action was needed. My second priority, and one that is important to me personally, was addressing the issue of sexual abuse. At the time, we were focused on players who had bravely come forward to discuss abuse they had experienced from coaches. The work we began with the Respect Group grew out of those efforts. It was important work, but I must say, however, that I regret there was not more focused on on-ice player conduct and on the culture of silence that appears to persist to this day. My third priority was to restore the financial health of the organization. When I took over as CEO, Hockey Canada was in financial distress and largely depended upon government funds. We set a goal to improve our finances. We did that by developing partnerships and other new revenue sources that helped expand our programs, while keeping participant fees relatively flat. We also put in place risk management mechanisms, including the insurance funds that have been at the center of much of your work. I'm pleased to read in the Cromwell report this comment: the establishment of reserve funds to address the risk and uninsured and underinsured claims is not only sound, but the failure to do so would be a serious oversight. It has been more than 8 years since I left Hockey Canada, and there may be details I can't recall to which I don't have access. But I can assure the committee that I'm here in the spirit of openness.
30 seconds.
And I want to work with you to create a healthy environment around our game. With that, I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicholson. And we're now going to go to the question and answer segment. And before I begin, I would like to let the committee know that Sébastien Lemire will be replacing Martin Champoux for the Bloc Québécois today. So we will begin with, for 6 minutes, the first round, with Kevin Waugh. Kevin, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to our guests today, Pat McLaughlin, Bob Nicholson. Bob, of course, long time with Hockey Canada, and before that, the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, which, of course, went into Hockey Canada. So, Mr. Nicholson, you referred to 2018, which you were not president, CEO of the organization, but you were in 2003 in Halifax at the World Juniors. When did you become aware of the sexual allegations out of that World Championship out of Halifax?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your question. The rumor was conveyed to me by a media person on July 7th at the draft in Montreal. That was the very first time that I heard anything about the 2003 incident.
We're going to talk about the funds because you've been there since day one. We find the National Equity Fund, then we find the Participants Legacy Trust Fund, and now we have a third fund that Hockey Canada uses for settlements. Mr. Nicholson, were you in charge of any of these funds since day one with Hockey Canada?
I was the CEO, but that area was really left to our insurance people. We had very good staff. We also had a committee that oversaw the insurance programs, as well as some expertise. You've had Barry Lorenzetti here before. He was a big part of that. And all of that came to me, but I was not day-to-day hands-on to that.
How many funds or other collections of money available for settling these sexual assault lawsuits were created while you were at Hockey Canada for your term there, almost 2 decades?
Yeah, the very first one was the equity fund, and then we moved into the legacy fund in 1999. And then the stabilization fund was there in 2007 and 2008.
Set up 3 funds, and I noticed in your address you said Hockey Canada wasn't very fluid on money. But today, as you know, Hockey Canada is the richest nonprofit sport organization in the country with almost $150 million in their bank account. So I want you to address these 3 funds to tell parents who had to pay the registration fees, I would say 90 to 100% not knowing that these funds were set up, and that parents across this country were shocked when the story broke in July that registration fees were in fact used for sexual assault cases.
Yes, I can tell you that when I left Hockey Canada, that those funds were in the neighborhood of $40 to $50 million. And those, there are other areas that money was there. The goal at that time was to make sure that we had enough funds if something drastic happened to Hockey Canada or the various levels below us. And the registration fee when I was there stayed the same at approximately $3, and I don't think has been raised since that time.
One of the issues that we've had around this table has been the non-disclosure agreements. We are not getting any answers from Hockey Canada on the non-disclosure agreements. You, as CEO, can you speak to the non-disclosure agreements under your term as CEO with Hockey Canada? How many were there?
I can't tell you the exact number of NDAs that were signed. I know that, you know, where there were payouts or NDAs signed under the Graham James situation. And there have been others that are there from staff in the past, but for me to say a number, I just don't have that. You could go back to Hockey Canada and hopefully they would give you the number of NDAs that have happened throughout my time with Hockey Canada.
From participating in its sanctioned teams and leagues. I mean, you mentioned Graham James, which, as you know, I'm familiar with from the province of Saskatchewan. He turns up coaching elsewhere. Nobody even knows about him, his past record. These are the sort of things that in the hockey world we're astonished to hear, that after banning Graham James in the hockey circles in this country, he shows up elsewhere and nobody has a track of these people that should be worldwide known about their sexual allegations and what they went through.
Kevin, thanks for asking that question. That was something that I got involved in. Graham James went to Spain to coach. We contacted the International Ice Hockey Federation at the time, and we also contacted Spain and gave them the information about Graham James. It was astonishing, but they allowed him to continue to coach.
You have 20 seconds left, Kevin.
Thank you. You must be sick of the allegations that has come forward since you left as CEO of Hockey Canada. Could you comment on that quickly?
I missed the first part of that, Kevin. Sorry.
I'm sorry. We're now out of time, Kevin. Perhaps somebody can ask that question later on from your team. Thank you. Now we're going to go to the Liberals, Michael Coteau, for 6 minutes. Michael.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. You know, over the last few months, it's been very challenging for this committee to get, you know, to the bottom of some of the accusations and even questions we asked previously around, you know, details like the secret funds. You know, it took us a while to get to the point to figure out that there was actually 3 funds. So I guess I want to start off by asking Mr. Nicholson, were there any additional funds beyond the 3?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I can only talk through the years that I was there, and those are the 3 insurance funds that were in place, to the best of my knowledge.
Do you know of any other non-insurance funds that were put in place?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
You were the CEO from 98 to 2014. Is that correct? 98 to 2014 of Hockey Canada. Would you say that ultimately
Désolé, l'interprétation ne fonctionne.
Madam Chair, interpretation is not working.
All right, I shall pause while someone checks that out and fixes it, please.
time do I have? Chair? How much time do I have, Chair? Sorry.
You have about 5.5 minutes left.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So back to Mr. Nicholson. You were the CEO of Hockey Canada from 1998 to 2014. And I would assume that the creation, implementation, and maintenance of these three funds, at least two of them were done under your watch. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So do you ultimately, as the CEO of the organization, take full responsibility for these funds?
From an operational standpoint, I do. You know, we have full-time staff that were working in insurance and risk management. They had a committee, and we had representatives from all our 13 member branches. And then we take those recommendations to our board.
You've heard the word used often, you know, in media and just even in the community that, you know, these funds were intended to cover up these horrific incidents in many cases. Would you say that they were designed to do just that?
I can tell you that during my time, majority of them were around the Graham James. Graham James was convicted. 5 of the 6 at that time were under Graham James, and we signed NDAs. And the reason we signed those NDAs at that time was as much to protect the victim. We have a couple of those individuals, Sheldon Kennedy and Theo Fleury, that have came out and spoke. But the other ones, we've protected them with those DNAs.
You spent 16 years as the person in charge of Hockey Canada. And over those 16 years, how many cases came across your desk of alleged sexual assault? Do you know?
I can't tell you exactly. Again, the majority came through the Graham James. There was one other incident that was a similar situation as that. And then there has been some discussion on a referee situation. I can't really remember. So there was, you know, a couple more than that at that time.
During your 16 years as the head of the organization, having these cases come forward, do you know how many payments were made to victims of sexual assault?
I look at that, and I think there's 7, but I'm not confident in that number, saying that number.
I'm just going to read a list of different sponsors that I'm assuming over the 16 years you attracted a lot of these sponsors to your organization. Bauer Hockey, Nike, Canadian Tire, TELUS, Scotiabank, Tim Hortons, Esso, Sobeys, Recipes Unlimited, Chevy Canada, Skip the Dishes, PepsiCo, BDO, BFL Insurance, Swiss Chalet, and The Keg. Now, all of those organizations have stopped sponsoring Hockey Canada. And I'm assuming you attracted a lot of that business to the organization. From your perspective, why do you think these brands have stopped supporting Hockey Canada?
It's really tough for me to say. They made their own individual decisions to do that. When a lot of this became public, it is too bad, but I don't want to speak for them.
You have no, you can't even speculate why they would leave sponsoring the organization? As you know, you were there for 16 years. You know these relationships well and what they're built on.
You know, I didn't see them as sponsors. I saw them as partners. And so they must have lost some trust in that partnership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicholson.
That's it.
Michael, your time is up. Thank you. I now go to the Bloc Québécois for 6 minutes, please. Sébastien Lemire. Sébastien?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question will be for Mr. Nicholson. You contributed to creating the toxic culture, in my view, for different reasons and perhaps for some bad reasons. What we are noticing in hindsight is that you were, in a sense, the architect of this culture, the passiveness and the culture of silence and the cover-up culture. My question is, what is the legacy that you left at Hockey Canada?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, that only came through in French and did not come through in English to myself.
Voulez-vous que je réessaye?
Would you like for me to try again? Is it working now? Now it's working? Okay, perfect. So can I start my 6 minutes over again, Madam Chair? Would you agree to that?
Well, I don't know if this full 6 minutes, Sebastian, but all right, we will let you have some extra time.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, the witness did not hear my question. I must repeat it, so I need to begin from the beginning.
Okay, we will go back to 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was mentioning that, in my view, the toxic culture that has been condemned and all of the scandals, sexual assault scandals, but also financial scandals, were probably created during the 16 years during which you were at the head of Hockey Canada. So I see you as the architect of this culture of silence. However, I imagine that your point of view might be different. So can you tell us what your heritage is at Hockey Canada in hindsight? What your legacy is, pardon me.
Again, Madam Chair, it only is coming across in French. I'm not getting the English translation.
Est-ce
Thank
que
you. I think once again, I will stop the clock and I will pause and ask the clerk to please deal with this particular problem and stand the meeting.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes?
I just think the witness may not be aware and he may be on the wrong channel. Could you perhaps instruct him how to be on the English channel so that he hears the translation?
I did at the beginning, but if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a globe, a little round globe. If you press that, it will also give you something that asks you to choose between English and French. If you press English, you will get the French translation done in English for you. Could you try that? And we can try it again. I have suspended the clock, so perhaps we can get...
Mr. Nicholson, I see you as being the head architect of Hockey Canada's culture, for better or for worse, but especially for the worse. So we're hearing about financial and sexual assault scandals and this cover-up culture at Hockey Canada, when Hockey Canada has remained passive and silent in the face of scandals. I imagine that your point of view is different, so can you tell us what is the legacy that you left during your time at Hockey Canada?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I really felt that the legacy that I left was that we had way more grassroots programs to include young boys and girls to play in the game. We reached out across the country to make that happen. I also felt, as I said in my opening statement, that there was a merger of Canadian amateur hockey and Hockey Canada, and both the organizations were not in a very good financial situation, and that we were able to look at new revenue sources and also look at international events that really helped us bring finances to the table to really give back to our 13 members. And our 13 members use those dollars from international events to help build national coaching certification programs, referee certification programs, and a tremendous amount of programs that was used coast to coast in the country. That was what I felt best about. Also looking at the risk
en créant ces programmes.
But in creating those programs, didn't you have a doubt that they could be used in a malicious way? In particular, all of this matter of non-disclosure agreements, which have been used to buy victims' silence. We learned that Hockey Canada was complicit in the non-disclosure, and inaction was how Hockey Canada responded to the sexual assault lawsuits. The 2018 team and the 2003 team players have said that they had nothing to do with the scandals. You were there for 16 years. Do you really think nothing happened and that you have no responsibility and that everything that happened with the victim was consensual?
I think that one of the key things from the programming point of view, I thought we did a very good job. When I look at the situations when I was there, and again, I'm going back to the Graham James, he was convicted. We signed NDAs to protect the victims. It was as much for that as anything. After I left Hockey Canada and the 2018 that has been investigated a lot, I can't make that comment because I wasn't there and I'm just getting bits of information on that like you are.
Donc, à ce moment-là, Hockey Canada se dit...
So, Hockey Canada was a victim of misinformation, is that right? That's what we heard at this committee. Do you have an opinion on the 15 allegations of victims of abuse that we've seen in the media?
You know, well, when I was there, I tried to be clear here of what we did at that time. I certainly can't make a comment on the other situations that happened when I wasn't there. I'm sorry.
Quel est, par rapport au rôle que vous occupiez...
Regarding the role that you played in the NHL, how does the NHL look at your work and its responsibilities? We know that there has been an investigation into the June 2018 case. The predators still have not been punished. Can we expect that the NHL will act? Regarding your players, if this happened, will you speak out against your own players?
First of all, I can tell you that I know there's an investigation going on by the NHL. I'm not privy to that information that they're doing. That will be dealt with at the National Hockey League office. I think the National Hockey League office over the last while has dealt with those situations as swiftly as they can. I can tell you that if one of those players from 2018 was on the Edmonton Oilers, which there isn't, we would have to look at that very closely and get all the information and make the appropriate decision.
Nous avons appris hier que...
Yesterday we learned that Hockey Canada, the NHL, and others received government money to not have the status of a not-for-profit organization. Can you tell us about this?
I'm afraid you only have 12 seconds to answer that question, Mr. Nicholson.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get that question clearly. I apologize for that.
Perhaps in your other round, Mr. Lemieux, you might be able to repeat your question. Thank you. And so I'm going to move to the...
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, if the witness did not understand my question, I will simply take another 30 seconds to ask the question so that he may answer.
All right, go ahead.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
More than that.
Merci.
Thank you. Yesterday we learned that Hockey Canada, the NHL, and members had benefited from the government to not be able to not be forced to submit the documents that they would have to be a not-for-profit organization. Can you comment on this?
From the NHL standpoint, I'm not aware that money was received from the government for this. That would have to be addressed with the league office in New York.
Thank you very much. I now move to the next questioner, and that's for the New Democratic Party, Mr. Julian Peter. 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have seen over the course of the last few months Hockey Canada appear before this committee. Each appearance has been, I think, more disastrous in terms of the erosion of public confidence we've seen, the loss of sponsors, the loss of government support, above all, the loss of confidence from hockey parents across the country who scrimp and save to put their daughter or son into Hockey Canada programs. And we had the most disastrous appearance last month on October 4th. And subsequent to that, as we're all aware, the board chair resigned, the CEO has resigned. The board has seemingly finally understood that the message that has come from Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The only way out is for Hockey Canada to come clean and to be transparent. And so my first question today is the same question that I asked back on October 4th, and that is regarding Navigator, public relations firm that seemingly provided the advice around Hockey Canada's stonewalling and refusing to answer questions. So, Mr. McLaughlin, I would like to ask you whose decision it was to hire Navigator, and will Hockey Canada finally come clean and tell us how much of the public's funds have been spent on Navigator for public relations?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Julian, for your question. Just before I start, there's two things I think speak directly to your comments, Mr. Julian, and certainly from previous testimony as well that you've had the hearings. My two main concerns coming in today, the first is that I do the best on behalf of our organization to provide the answers that everyone deserves. And so I am concerned in some areas if I don't have the answers that it may look like I'm not trying to provide them, but I'm going to do my best. That's my commitment. The second is that in my opening statement, I talked about the importance of us working together. And for those that know me, I'm true to my word, and I truly mean that. Specifically to Navigator, Hockey Canada staff were directed by the board in early July to contact Navigator. I contacted Navigator on July 5th. I had a follow-up discussion with them on July 7th. They started to do work with Hockey Canada on July 8th. I can tell you that it's not a communications exercise that they've been involved with. This has been about you, as you have said, about transparency. They've given the board significant advice in terms of governance. They've helped us in terms of trying to find prominent Canadians to be part of our action plan, the oversight committee. They've also helped us on a day-to-day basis to work with the media. We have a small communications team that's primarily focused on events and communication. And I know that your next question will be the dollar amount, and I can tell you that as of year to date, I've been told that our dollars has been about $1.6 million with Navigator, and there's been no public funds that have been spent on that.
1.6 million. Appreciate you finally providing that answer. As part of the mandate given to Navigator, did that include being critical of journalists or journalistic coverage around the scandals that have been flowing around Hockey Canada? Was part of Navigator's responsibility to go after journalists or to go after stories?
Again, thank you for the question, and I understand the nature of the question. I know that yourself, Mr. Nader, certainly Mr. Housefather, in the last hearings all spoke to, Navigator and disappointment and what you've read in the minutes. What I want to share with you, the answer to that is no. And I want to share something with you and the committee that I feel is very important, if I could.
Very, very sorry, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you for answering that, but I've got other questions. And that, okay. When we talked about non-disclosure agreements, consistently with Mr. Smith in July, Mr. Brenda Moore and Ms. Skinner in October, the question has been raised about Hockey Canada releasing people from non-disclosure agreements. Has anyone been released from non-disclosure agreements? Has there been any discussion at all within Hockey Canada in that regard?
Again, thanks for the question. This is an area that's not my expertise. What I can tell you, though, is that I read an excellent article on the weekend, I believe it was the Toronto Star, about the advancement of the thinking around NDAs. They use Hockey Canada as an example. There's a few experts that were part of that article, including a PEI case, where they said that our issues have certainly expanded the minds and the thinking in and around that.
Sorry, Mr. McLaughlin, I'll have to cut you off again. I've got other questions, but what you're saying is no one has been released from non-disclosure agreements.
To my knowledge, Mr. Julian, no one has been released.
Well, I mean, this is a rhetorical question. Why, when we've had this issue out for months? I will now go on to the issue of the complaint process. If you mentioned it in your opening remarks, somebody has a complaint. There are serious allegations of sexual violence or sexual abuse. What do they do at this point? Who do they contact? Who is responsible for the complaint process?
Thanks for the question again, and not my expertise, but I did talk to our Safe Sport Vice President to ensure that I could answer this question to the best of my ability. If it's at the national team level,
30 seconds.
They would work direct with OSIC. I'll be quick. If it's at a non-national team level, we've instituted the third-party mechanism, and all the member branches in Hockey Canada have special buttons on their websites to direct people to get that support should they need it.
Final question around severance payments
Peter,
for Mr. Smith.
10 seconds.
Yes.
You may not get an answer.
How much did Mr. Smith is he receiving in severance for having stepped down?
Thanks for the question. I actually report to Mr. Smith, and that would be a question for the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And now we're going to go to the second round. But before we do, I would like to again repeat that people on the floor, please turn off your microphones or mute yourself in some way after you finish speaking or while others are speaking. The echo causes a problem for the interpreters sometimes because there's a huge echo. Okay. Thank you very much. And now we're going to go to the second round, which is a 5-minute round. Again, 5 minutes is for the question and the answer. And we begin with, for the Conservative Party, Mrs. Rachel Thomas. 5 minutes, please, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, I'm wondering if the current board of directors is in the process of choosing the next CEO.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the question. The current board of directors will not choose the next CEO. That will be at the discretion of the new board, and the new board will be in place after our election on December 17th.
Thank you. Also wondering who put the 5 questions forward to Mr. Cromwell to investigate?
I can tell you that on July 12th, we had meetings with the board. We invited experts on governance to come in and help our board to understand what a proper and appropriate governance review could look like. And so the questions were built by experts, approved by the board, and then the process was moved forward. And we were fortunate that Justice Cromwell and his team have done an outstanding job and really provides a framework and a roadmap for us as we move forward with our new board.
I note that in the 5 questions that were put forward, there was a request that he look at 2 of the funds, but not the third fund. In fact, the third fund wasn't even disclosed. It was something that he dug up. Why is that?
I can't speak to why that is, but I can tell you that I'm glad that he did. I think it's outstanding. And again, it sheds a light on what you've talked about and your colleagues have talked about, that in the interest of transparency and much better communication, we have great opportunity there to be much better. And so the work that Justice Cromwell has done is going to lead the organization moving forward.
Okay. Mr. McLaughlin, I would agree with you. I do think there is an opportunity to do much better. In your opening remarks, you said you gave a list of a few things that the organization promised to do and has followed through on. One of them is you said that the organization promised to do a full governance review and that they did that, and you're pointing to the Cromwell report. My concern is, however, is that this is actually the 3rd independence governance review since 2014. So in 8 years, this is the 3rd one that has been required because adequate action hasn't been taken. organization. The culture of secrecy and cover-up has been perpetuated for 8 years, despite these 3 independent reviews. So I'm curious, why should the Canadian public trust you now?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the question. I can't speak to the previous governance reviews. I can only speak to, how I operate and how our staff operates and our members operate. And at the end of the day, it's all about delivery and execution. We have a significant mandate, and we need to deliver for all Canadians, and there's no room for error on that. And so that's why I can say that we're appreciative of the work that Justice Cromwell has done. I can tell you that on October 15th and 16th, we met with our members. The members have already advanced a number of the recommendations of Justice Cromwell and his team. We have further dialogue to take place this weekend, and the work will be at the hands of our transition board to help lead and drive forward. So I'm very hopeful as we move forward with respect to the work of the governance review.
Mr. Nicholson, one of the things that Justin Cromwell stated in his report on page 95 is he said, and I quote, both the National Equity Fund and the Insurance Rate Stabilization Fund are used for purposes that are not fully disclosed in the financial statements. This phrase, not fully disclosed, speaks of secrecy rather than transparency. You stated that as CEO, your goal was to make yourself transparent and financially accountable. Why is it that you didn't fully disclose the need for this fund?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I really felt that we did disclose the information to our members. And remember who our members were. There's 13 branches.
Mr. Nicholson, with all due respect, Mr. Justice Cromwell would disagree with you. He said that it wasn't fully disclosed. So you might feel that way, but an independent reviewer is saying that isn't the case. So why isn't it?
Yeah, what I recall, and
Point of order, Madam Chair. Ms. Thomas's time should be stopped, and we should. Mr. Nicholson's last answer wasn't audible to us. I think he's on mute, so perhaps he could resume his answer, Madam Chair.
Point of order, Madam Chair, and I think you may be able to hear us, but we can't hear anyone on Zoom, so I don't know if we can suspend perhaps for a moment. And again, I agree with Mr. Housefather that Ms. Thomas's time should be stopped and Mr. Nicholson be given an opportunity to reread the question, or answer the question.
No, Dr. Fry, nobody in the room can hear you except me with a headset on. Can you say suspend and I will inform the PVO?
Ms. Thomas, we will resume. but I will give you, since the time has stopped, I'm giving you an extra few seconds because this had started before we had stopped the clock.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Nicholson, I'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to answer as to why you didn't fully disclose in the financial statements this fund that existed for insurance rate stabilization.
Yes, I really thought we did. I don't have the financial statements in front of me, Rachel. I felt that we gave those to our members. If they're not in our financial statements that you receive from Hockey Canada, obviously then they weren't given out to them.
Mr. Nicholson, in your view, though, that should be made available?
Yes, it should.
Go ahead.
I can't hear you, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. They shut your mic off.
Okay. Sorry,
Okay.
my question, you agreed that it would be important to be transparent about the use of that fund, the purpose of it. I'm curious as to why you feel that's important.
I think any of those funds are important to make sure. And at the time, we were really trying to make sure they were there for our 13 members who then deliver that information to the grassroots and all of the minor hockey associations. So it is important for us to do that at our board table at that time.
Mr. Nicholson, why is transparency in an organization like Hockey Canada important?
It's really important. And, you know, when I look at it, the board structure was a lot different when I was there. We had over 25
Mr. Nicholson,
members.
I'm sorry. I'm just not getting to the why. Why is it important?
Why is it important? So that all of our
20
members
seconds.
can give the information to minor hockey players and parents of the information that how Hockey Canada uses its funds and its finances.
Thank you very much. The time is up, and I will now move to the Liberal member, Anthony Housefather, for 5 minutes, please, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to both witnesses. And Mr. McLaughlin, your sincerity did come through to me, and I thank you for that. Mr. Nicholson, I wanted to start by asking a question. When you were CEO of Hockey Canada, was it a standard practice to have employees, when they resign, sign NDAs?
There certainly were some that signed NDAs, but there wasn't all of them. I can't, Anthony, I can't tell you how many there were, but in some situations, depending on the amount of knowledge that they would have, there would be some type of clause.
Because today, Rick Westhead had reported that 2 staffers connected with the women's national team in 2013, 2014 had signed NDAs, as had Dan Church, who resigned right before the 2014 Olympics. Are you aware of the circumstances that led to those NDAs being signed?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing up that question. And there is an NDA that is in place. I know that Dan Church and two other coaches signed those NDAs. I was fully aware of how they got to that position. I was not involved. We had other senior people doing it. It was a evaluation of a coach going into the Olympic Games, and a decision was made after meeting with a number of the staff and I think majority of the players that we would make a change in the coaching staff, and an NDA was signed by Dan and by 2 other coaches for sure.
Thank you so much for your candor, Mr. Nicholson. Let me just ask, did allegations of harassment lead to any of what happened, or was this just simply disappointment by players and not allegations that would be of a serious nature that should have been disclosed?
A great question. And what I remember was really a in-depth evaluation from the staff and from the players. And after all of those individual meetings happened, they thought it was in the best interest to make a coaching change for us to move forward to going to the Olympic Games.
Fair enough. I think this may be something others will pursue. But I just wanted to also ask Mr. Nicholson, I mean, from everything that I've heard about you, from everything that I've gotten, you're a very good businessman. You're somebody who has a lot of ability. Can I understand why there was no written guidelines related to what people should do at Hockey Canada when there was a claim of sexual harassment while you were there? You would think that this would want to be one of the first things that you would have the organization put in place.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that question, you know what? I wish I could go back. I wish I could have put more policies in. My job as CEO was to really run the operations. Policies came from the board, and I'm not deflecting that back to the board. I was the CEO, and I should have been encouraging more policies. And when I listen to yourself speak and others speak, it was something I would have liked to have done. I didn't, and I'm sorry about that.
No, you can't cry over spilt milk, and I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate your reflection on it because we haven't gotten so much reflection before. So, can I ask, while you were CEO, were you ever directed by the board to sign settlement agreements?
Yes, I was.
When you were so directed, at the time that you were there, did the board minute those mandates to you? Did the board put in their minutes, we approve a settlement agreement and we authorize Mr. Nicholson to sign the settlement agreement? Or were you left out on a limb that one day you'd have to prove that the board actually authorized you to do that?
Very good question. I'm thinking about right now. You know what? I was directed to sign those agreements from recommendations from our lawyers, from our risk management, from our insurance people. We took it back to the board, the settlements, and then I'd sign it. My role with, I'll use Graham James again, was having our legal, our insurance, our risk and safety management, our expertise to work on the settlement. And then I had the role to meet with the victims, and I had to meet with them several times, and then we came up with the final settlement fee. And I know how difficult it was for those victims.
30 seconds, Anthony.
No, and I appreciate that. I just think that, again, it puts you in a very bad position. You or any employee that's being asked to sign something with no written proof years later that you were mandated to do it. And so, in any case, I appreciate your testimony, and I'll ask Mr. McLaughlin questions in my next round. Thank you, Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Housefather. I now go to Mr. Lemire for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Nicholson, I will ask my question from earlier again. Nonprofit organizations have a special status and they're exempt from having to pay amounts to the federal government. But there are obligations that come along with that nonprofit status, and they have to submit their bylaws, etc. You had the right not to submit those documents way back to 2000. Hockey Canada and its partners, its championship partners, so the Ontario League, the Western League, the Junior Major League, the NHL, all use the same practice. Is this practice in order to fill up the coffers without contributing properly? Can you tell us why those documents were not submitted by you to the government as it should have been done?
Yeah, I can't talk to each one of those documents, but, we had, in the majority of my time with Hockey Canada, we had people from the government, Sport Canada, sitting at our table. We met with Sport Canada individuals on an ongoing basis, and all the documents, all the bylaws, all how we governed ourselves, really, those questions were asked, or I felt comfortable that Sport Canada was there all the time around Hockey Canada. So I thought those were given to the government. In regards to the National Hockey League, I can't answer that. That's something you have to deal with the NHL office in New York.
Combien de fonds
How many funds in total exist? We now know of 3. And which ones, or for example, we've heard of $1, 50-50 shared between the branches and Hockey Canada. Can you tell us how the accounting is carried out? And we're interested in funds that are used to settle sexual assault allegations that come from the branches.
Yes, I'd like to be able to give you more detail on that. I didn't have day-to-day access, or I wasn't dealing with insurance and risk management back to the branches. We had insurance committee people, we had insurance staff, as well as legal staff that would deal with that. Any of the major ones that would came up, then they would bring it to my table and we would take it to to our board for approval.
Thank you. That time is,
Merci.
Thank you.
Well over time. I'm going to Mr. Julian for the NDP. Can someone please turn your mics off on the floor? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to Mr. Julian for the NDP for 2.5 minutes, please, Peter.
Thank you. I found it outrageous that $1.6 million was spent for Navigator with such a disastrous public relations strategy, and profoundly disappointing that nearly 4 months after Hockey Canada pledged to release people if they chose to be released from their NDA, that not a single of the people bound by non-disclosure agreements has been released. That's my comment. Now to questions. Mr. Nicholson, just to clarify what you said in response to Mr. Housefather, you're saying that in the 2013-2014 women's national team, no players were asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement?
No, I'm not sure if they were asked or if any did. I know that coaches were.
And secondly, in terms of in-camera meetings with no written minutes, you were aware that was a practice while you were CEO?
Looking back, sadly, yes, too many in camera.
I'm going to move to the horrific allegations around the 2003 assault in Halifax. Are you aware of who was present in Halifax in 2003 from Hockey Canada? And has the Halifax police contacted you as they investigate those horrific allegations?
I can tell you that, again, I'll try to go quickly just over the timelines. On July 7th, I heard of this rumor. On July 8th, I called a couple staff with Hockey Canada to find out if they had known about the rumor. They had not. And then I was notified on July 22nd that Hockey Canada was issuing a statement about the rumor to
Yes, I apologize. I don't have a lot of time. Has the Halifax police contacted you about this?
No, they have not.
Okay, thank you.
I've been contacted by...
Thank you. All right.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Mr. Brindamore testified that board rings, championship rings, are given to board members $3,000 a pop. Is that a practice that started when you were CEO? And can you comment on the $5,000 that have been alleged to have been spent by Hockey Canada on board dinners?
Yes, let me first of all start with the rings. Everyone that was involved with the team got a ring. Over my period, there was once we bought it for the entire board, and maybe twice, Peter. I can't honestly remember, but it'd be once or twice. We did have board members that were with the team, and they would have gotten the rings as part of the group with the team.
Thank you. I'm afraid I have to stop because we've gone well over time, and maybe you can expand on that in another question, Mr. Nicholson. So I now go to the Conservatives for 5 minutes, Mr. Shields.
Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses that are here today. Appreciate it. Mr. Nicholson, I'm going to read just a statement from the report, the Cromwell report. Now, Hockey Canada has adopted an informal approach that would see claims run through first the NEF, then the reverse sub-fund in the IRS fund, then to the Legacy Trust, and finally to the remaining funds in the IRS fund. To our knowledge, the Legacy Trust was not designed with the IRS fund in mind, and no formal policy exists to govern how Hockey Canada is to respond to claims. You've made some statements that you wished you had. You could go back. Does this, as a CEO, leave you to say, I missed something here with that statement in this report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for that question. And it's a really difficult one for me to answer. As I stated earlier, we had an insurance department. We had the committees that dealt with all of that. I certainly oversaw that as the CEO that would have to bring any of those changes to the board for final approval. And when I look back, I think we should have had more policies. We should have had more flow in how all of that information went. That's as deep as I can get into that. And sorry, Martin, I can't give you more information.
All right. It's one of the challenges when there's no policies in place, then things go sideways. And I think that's what you're experiencing and what you're saying here. There were 21 claims, but 10 of them were not of sexual in nature. Were there not NDAs for those other agreements when you were there for injuries? Did they go through a similar process? Do you know?
I'm not 100% on that. Probably isn't right for me to comment. Those probably were done within our insurance group and were not brought to my desk. If they were brought to my desk, I can't honestly tell you if they're NDAs or not.
They would have been funded, though, past the insurance that you had, because these were above the insurance policies, so they would have gone into these funds. You're not aware of those then?
I'm not aware of all those, no.
When you talked about the AGMs and the in-camera, one of the things that you had hoped was that people understood what you were doing, yet there was no line items for several of these funds in your financials. How would they have known about it if there's no line item for some of these funds? How are they explained if there's no line item? How would people know about them?
Thanks for that question. And we used to have what we called financial forums that we had the branch presidents as well as their people that were involved in their day-to-day operations of the finance as well as risk management. I'm assuming that all that detail happened at that time. I can't tell you. I didn't sit in all of those meetings. But there was a lot of detail and a lot of flow of information that went back between our CFO and our financial committee and that to our 13 members.
So in an AGM, in an in-camera meeting with no line items, then the 13 members you're talking about would be in a very difficult situation if they were only hearing an oral explanation, possibly, right?
Can't disagree.
Okay, thank you. 1.7 million for external review of the report. That's the number that's there, 1.7 for this governance report.
I think Mr. Shields, is that for myself? Yes. I just also want to touch on, Ms. Thomas also asked about the Cromwell report, and Justice Cromwell himself on the terms of reference also certainly weighed in and provided his input with the terms before we move forward with his work. My understanding is it's $1.7 million to answer your question. It's an investment in the organization's future. We're making significant transformational change and we needed that work to be done. It's certainly not a competency that we have within the organization, and we're appreciative of the work that was done, but it comes at an expense, but I look at it as an investment.
Okay, and you've got another $3 million expense for Longview. Longview's involved in that? And what's
30
Longview?
seconds.
What's Longview doing for you in the $3 million?
We've invested at this point about $6 million in total. Longview is a piece of that. There's other work that's been done too. We've made an investment in OSIC. We certainly expand our safe sport department. So there's a number of things, Mr. Shields, that are within that $6 million that aggregate.
What's Longview doing?
To move ahead.
What's
Longview helped us early. Longview
Thank
helped
you.
us.
I think the time is up, Mr. Shields. Thank you very much. And I now go to Ms. Hepner, Lisa, for 5 minutes for the Liberals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. And through you, I'd like to start my questions to Mr. Nicholson. You said in your opening statement that we didn't go far enough on off-ice conduct and that you want a culture where everyone feels safe and welcome in hockey. But you also seem to still support the existence of these reserve funds. So I'm wondering if you agree that when you have a fund that pays off victims so that perpetrators don't have to face any consequences for sexual assault, you are not only condoning that behavior, you are enabling it, you are institutionalizing it. Do you agree?
I think when I look at the situations that I was involved in Hockey Canada, and those individuals, and there was a couple of them, they were convicted in the courts. And so we had those discussions with the victims, and I felt that we protected the victims in that situation as much as possible.
Okay. So what do you say? And you were in charge of Hockey Canada in 2003, which is when we have some of these allegations. So what do you say to the women who were victims of what we're hearing was a culture of gang rape among junior hockey players? What do you say to the women?
That's not acceptable. Find the courage to come forward. In the 2003, as I've stated, we're just hearing about that now. I hope that the investigation, and there is ongoing investigations, will be able to come forward. And if these rumors are true, there will be severe circumstances for the individual players.
Sir, we heard, I read in one news report that of about $20 that parents pay to put their kids in hockey, 13 of those dollars went to these reserve funds to in part pay off sex assault victims. So why do you think that outraged parents, and what does it actually cost to put a kid into hockey so they can have fun playing hockey?
Yeah, you know what, Madam Chair, thanks for the question, and thank you, Lisa, for that. Because I really feel that when you look at the funds for hockey and what the costs are, there's the insurance fund, which when I was there was approximately $11, and there was a fee of $3 for individuals to play. That $3 hasn't increased, I don't think, over the last number of years. Insurance might have gone up, but the real cost and fees to kids start to be charged at the provincial, the regional, and minor hockey levels. The majority of the funds that Hockey Canada generates goes back to helping participants with their programs and that. And Hockey Canada was fortunate to build a lot of revenues from international events. 18% of international events, women's world championships, world juniors, go back to grassroots programming. I'm not saying it's for fees, but it certainly helps on all of the grassroots programming that's developed in the country.
Turning to Mr. McLaughlin, as brand manager, I'm wondering if you can describe for us what it did to the Hockey Canada brand when all of the sponsors mentioned by my colleague earlier left Hockey Canada, and places like Ontario and Quebec pulled out of Hockey Canada. What did that do to your brand?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the question. There's no question that this has been extremely challenging, which would be an understatement. We've had significant meetings with the members on October 15th and 16th, and the members have made clear that they're behind us, but they've made clear that we need a lot of work to be done. With respect to the sponsors, I can share with this group, it's in and around $23.5 to $24 million that our CFO has forecasted that will be the impact of where we are today. Some of those dollars are due to the events that we hosted, the World Championships during COVID. We had an obligation in the IHF to host those, but more importantly, we want to provide an opportunity for our athletes to compete. But it also came at an expense when you're running in a bubble with no fans and those types of things. But specifically to your point with the incident of 2018, we have sponsors that are in 2 or 3 categories. One category is they're out altogether. The other category is they've postponed or they've delayed. And there's another category where partners have said that they're going to reposition their dollars towards grassroots hockey, towards women and girls hockey, or towards para athletes. But the reality is, well, that's great, and we're very appreciative of the repositioning of the dollars.
Mr. McLaughlin?
The reality is that that's not a dollar for a dollar. It's cents on the dollar. So it comes at a significant cost to us, without question.
Thank you very much. Now I think we have time for a third round if everyone tries to be concise and stick to their times. So the third round, we will begin with the Conservatives for 5 minutes. Marilyn Gladue. Marilyn, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I must say it is really disheartening. I've been a parliamentarian now 7 years, and I was the chair of Status of Women. And from the beginning, we've been trying to reduce and eliminate violence against women and girls. We've seen, I was presiding over all of the military sexual assault history of years and years of a culture that has really, we've still not seen much improvement. And so to see Hockey Canada in a similar situation from allegations in 2003 to 2018, and I'm not sure how bad the situation has to be in order to have 3 funds to pay off victims, but this is really disturbing. I want to try to say you can't change the past, and I hope that people will come forward, survivors, but you can change the future. And so I want to focus on the culture change that's needed. And so my first question will be for Mr. McLaughlin. One of the things that's very important is understanding consent. Anybody that hasn't seen the video out on YouTube called Consent T-E-A, needs to go take a look at that. But you've been through the mandatory violence and consent training that you mentioned is part of your action plan, have you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for it's just getting a bit of feedback there, apologize. Thanks for the question, and thank you for the work that you did. I wasn't aware that that's the work that you do, and I share the concerns that you and all Canadians have. I have taken the training. I found it to be incredibly valuable. There's a lot more that I have to learn in this area, but certainly was very, very beneficial.
And what do you think is needed to be done in order to change the culture of the players? I think there's been a lot of effort spent on coaches, and I think that was right. But for the actual players to understand that, naked and unconscious is not consent, what needs to be done?
I think it starts at, it's a spectrum, and I appreciate the question. And to me, it goes back a little bit to Mr. Julian in previous hearings where he's asked what we're doing around reporting of numbers and what we're doing in and around maltreatment, abuse, and harassment. And there's a lot of work that we are doing. We're getting prepared to release a report here in the next little bit that will share our first attempt to move forward and be better in this area. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is around education. And we have a lot of work to do. I think we've been clear on that we are not the experts. We are consulting with the experts. I think everyone here expects us to do that. Our members have been clear on that. And so we come here from a position of, if this is a power play or the penalty kill, running a world-class event or doing things for grassroots hockey, we're not the best, but we feel we're good and we can certainly get help on that. But
yeah,
in this
certainly.
case
Thank
we're
you.
talking about, we need a lot of help.
Thank you. I am also concerned that although some of the allegations happened years ago, there don't seem to have been any consequences for those that the allegations are against. Is your organization taking any action in that light?
Thanks for the comment. And I'm like you, I don't want to dwell on negative past, but focus on a positive future. And what I can tell you is that we have an independent third-party mechanism that's now in place. We have now joined OSIC, and I think that working with those 2 expert groups will be in a much better position as we move forward.
All right, a question for Mr. Nicholson. You had mentioned that Sports Canada was sort of in a oversight position, knowing what was happening at Hockey Canada all those years. What controls should the government be putting in place to ensure that that we're not continually funding organizations that we then find out are having sexual assault issues or are funding anti-Semites and all these different issues that come up? What should the government do to show better governance there?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that question. I think you're doing a good job with the way the committee's working now. I think you're getting a lot more information to put the right platforms and the right topics in for NSOs to move forward. The transparency one, I'm assuming that Hockey Canada has really learned from this. And they will change their ways. I think the other key thing is for you as government to put in those platforms that are really important or are necessary for NSOs to get funding. And a lot of it's around expenses. Lots of it's around the communication internally with NSOs and then how they have to report to government. And I've even thought further of how you report to your partners, and your partners being your 13 branches and all your sponsors, because you need sponsors for sport to grow in this country for young boys and girls.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ledoux. Thanks, Marilyn. I will now go to the Liberal Party. Chris Biddle. Chris, 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Housefather will take the questions.
All right, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I want to come to Mr. McLaughlin. First of all, again, I thank you for your sincerity in your comments today. Your tone is very, very clear. And my colleague, Mr. Julian, took or appropriated some of the questions that I had for you about Navigator. I think that the story today is that you've spent $1.6 million on Navigator. Can I ask you, in the Cromwell report on page 192, it says that you're in charge of developing and implementing Hockey Canada's communication strategy, Mr. McLaughlin. You're saying that the board is the one that influenced you or instructed you to approach a crisis management company like Navigator. When it came to the board strategy in August, where the board took the position that it wanted to fight back, that it wanted to counter the negative media, are you saying that this came only from the board and it was not Navigator's advice?
Thanks, Mr. Housefather. I'm not sure that I'm allowed to compliment you on your nice blue shirt, so I won't. However, to answer your question directly, we were advised early on in June, and not by Navigator, that in situations like this, boards and senior staff quite often are in a defense mode and try to defend and justify and justify and justify. And I think it took all of us, not just the board, all of us a while to get through that. And I do want to share one example if I can, and it's important. We had a staff, and it does get back to the board comment in a second. We had a staff meeting on August 4th, and we thought we were doing a really good job with communication with our staff. And I can tell you that it was a disastrous meeting. I left that call with some of our colleagues we are not doing a good job to get our message out. It was awful. And shortly after, we found out the same with our members. And really, the comments in the minutes are probably not the best terminology, and that's no one's fault but our own. It's really about us creating a more transparent environment and doing a better job, like the questions we're getting today around the NEF and the Legacy Trust Fund, do a better job to communicate with people the detail that's required. And we haven't done a good job at that. And that whole turn, Mr. Housefather, was about trying to do a better job ourselves with those people that matter most within Hockey Canada's environment.
Thanks. I agree with you. Certainly the communications left a lot to be desired. Sue, let me ask you another question. You are in charge of communications. In July of 2022, Hockey Canada sent a memo to its members about the equity fund. It said that the NEF is used to pay insurance premiums, deductibles, uninsured and underinsured claims, in addition to funding a wide range of safety, well-being, and wellness initiatives, including counseling and treatment for its players. Were you involved in crafting that statement?
I didn't directly craft the statement. I certainly saw it before it went out, but I didn't directly craft that statement.
True?
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm asking you if this statement was true.
My understand, again, I'm not being evasive. It's not my area of expertise. My understanding is that it is true. I know that a number of our members shared that on their website and with their members, and that we also held town halls, virtual town halls.
They did, Mr. McLaughlin, they did, and that's the reason that I'm so concerned about it, because Justice Cromwell on page 151 of his report found no indication that any safety, well-being, or wellness initiatives were ever paid from this fund. So basically, you advised your members that the fund had all kinds of altruistic components in addition to paying out these claims, but it turns out that it wasn't true at all. It turns out that that was absolutely false, and he acknowledges that in his report. So basically, it seems to me that there was a communication strategy to advise the public that the fund had various good things in addition to the negative, and that's what scares me. So let me ask you a different question. In 2014, the financials described, it basically said the National Equity Fund balance has been accumulated as a precaution against judgments that may be made against the association as a result of current or future claims, which is true. Then it says the association is currently involved in defending legal actions resulting from accidents and injuries involved in CHA play. Provision has been made for estimated settlements and professional fees related to these actions. In 2015, the wording was changed to say accidents and injuries involved in CHA actions in the financials to defending legal actions resulting from accidents and injuries involved in sanctioned hockey activities. Do you know why the change was made from the 2015 financials to change injuries or accidents and injuries involved in CHA play to accidents and injuries involved in sanctioned hockey activities?
I appreciate the question. This is one of these ones, again, Mr. Housefather, where I don't have an answer because it's not my area, so I do apologize. And I take note of your previous comment on our communication, and I'm going to go back and have a look at that to see what needs to be done to rectify that.
Fair enough, because my concern, again, is, and comes back to Mrs. Thomas's question, you're telling the world that the fund is meant to defend legal actions resulting from accidents and injuries either in sanctioned hockey activities, which is a wider thing, versus previously in CHA play. To me, before you were saying it was on the ice, now you're saying it's sanctioned activities off the ice. Mr. McLaughlin, would you say that the 2018 alleged sexual misconduct incident with the players assaulting a woman in a hotel room would be sanctioned hockey activities?
Mr. Housefather, you are now well over your time. I understand you have the next slot for questions, so maybe you can bring that up again. Thank you. Okay, and now I will go to Mr. Lemire for 2.5 minutes, please. Mr. Lemire.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McLaughlin, for players participating in Hockey Canada programs and championships, are part of junior hockey leagues. You said that you are part of the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner now. Will you still be able to borrow the players that you usually do so that they can participate in the upcoming World Championship?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lemire, for the question. The answer is yes, we will. We have an arrangement with the Canadian Hockey League and CGHL, and we certainly look forward to those players being part of our programming.
Est-ce que Hockey Canada...
Is Hockey Canada fulfilling all of its obligations to Sport Canada, and has its funding been reestablished?
We have a number of commitments to Sport Canada for the funding to be reestablished. As you mentioned earlier, we have signed with OSIC, which is a very, very important step for us. We've also instituted mandatory sexual assault and consent training, and all of our athletes, the staff or volunteers are all part of that. So we're 100% compliant since September 1st, which is really, really important as we move forward, and we'll continue to build on that.
Effectivement,
Yes. And you also did business with Navigator. Earlier you mentioned that Cromwell is a governance expert and you're not, and that's why you turned to an expert. But you also went to a public relations firm instead of raising awareness about consent, bullying, sexual assault, etc. Isn't that a contradiction?
I think that, that might be one way to look at it. I prefer to look at it and say that we need help in a number of areas. one of the areas we needed help was with governance. Navigator helped us with that. We have a lot of work to do on the education and sexual assault consent training that you're speaking to. We've worked with the Waterloo Sexual Assault Center and other experts to try to build this out to be much better where we are. So I look at it as an investment in a number. It's a multifaceted approach that we need to take in order to move us forward and drive transformational change.
Nous avons appris hier.
Yesterday, we learned that documents sent by Mr. McKenzie and a copy of the Hennon Hutchinson report was included. Did Sport Canada receive the same copy of the Hennon Hutchinson report from 2019? And why do you not want to make that document public now?
Please be concise, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure what the CHL has done.
Thank you. I think that is the end of Mr. Lemire's round, and I'm going to go to Mr. Julian for 2.5 minutes, please, Peter.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. On the issue around Dan Church and the 2013-2014 women's national team, you talked about performance issues. I'm curious as to why an NDA would be signed in this context. If a coach is fired for performance issues, is it because is that something that under your tenure that Hockey Canada did systematically impose an NDA, or are there special conditions around this that, in the opinion of Hockey Canada, required an NDA? Is something being covered up? Is my question.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Peter, for the question. We didn't have a set guidelines on NDAs. I'll go right to the Dan Church. And I can't say too much because we do have signed NDA with him, but it was a number of very touchy subjects that were discussed with the assistant coaches, with the number of players on the team, and I'm sure that was the reason why it came back to my desk to have NDA signed from a recommendation from our HR and our senior staff.
Thank you. I'm going to go to you, Mr. McLaughlin. The labyrinth of funds, the balance of funds, National Equity Fund, Legacy Trust Fund, Stabilization Fund, we have requested to know what the fund balances are. Is that something you can provide to committee? And my second question is around, you mentioned just a few moments ago that Sports Canada, you seem to be on track to have Sports Canada funding reestablished. Have you received a confirmation from the federal government that they will be providing funds again to Hockey Canada?
We had, I believe, I stand corrected, Mr. Julian, but we had 4 requirements with Sport Canada. I know that we've moved along on a number of them. We're not complete. We have not, to my knowledge, had any indication from Sport Canada that we're going to receive any funding. And as this group knows, we've undergone an audit and we have a 2-year further extension on that. So I don't want to suggest that we're close to receiving our funds. I'm not sure where that stands. I know that we had 4 commitments, and we're happy to provide the balances to the funds that you've requested, and I'll make sure their staff does that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The time is up, Peter. Thank you. Now I go to the final group, and that is for the Conservatives. Rachel Thomas. Ms. Thomas, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, I just wonder if you would agree to send an update as to what those 4 principles are that you've been asked to abide by, or changes that you've been asked to make by Sport Canada, and then also where you're at in terms of that journey.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
My question then is to Mr. Nicholson. Mr. Nicholson, in the Cromwell report, Justice Cromwell, he said this. He found that the current crisis, the causes of the current crisis, quote, are not of recent origin, end quote. Having said that they're not of recent origin points to the fact that actually it's an accumulation of factors over years. Now, you were CEO and president from 1998 to 2014, so the vast majority of those years were under your care when we look at recent history. So I'm just wondering, what is the responsibility that you might take for the circumstances that Hockey Canada currently finds itself in and the sexual assault allegations that have been brought forward?
I can only comment on the times that I was there and the sexual assault things that happened. And I really felt that through Graham James and a couple of those other situations that we handled it correctly internally, from our legal to our insurance to our risk and safety management. But we didn't handle it correctly because we took so much of it in camera. And when I look back at this, I look at all the documents that we did on the negotiations of each one of those legal cases, and then having to sit down with those victims. We were really thorough. We were really thorough on that. And I lived that. I know how many times I met with those victims. And I wish we could change that we didn't go in camera. We did, and we didn't have it minuted. And I think that's a big part of what Justin Cromwell was alluding to. We had to focus more on the off-ice situations with players. I was dealing a lot with on ice, the hitting from behind, the Brad Horning situation. Those are there is a lot of that.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Mr. McLaughlin, I was reading through on the website, and there's this document that is with regards to the Cromwell report, the governance review. And as I was reading it through, I found the language very interesting, and seeing as how you're taking responsibility for that, I thought I would ask this question to you. The phrases that are used here talk a lot about, and I'll actually just quote, rebuild the confidence of stakeholders and the public is the goal, to rebuild the confidence of stakeholders and the public. And the document goes on to talk about basically the image of Hockey Canada and trying to reinstate that. What I don't see, however, is any desire to actually rebuild the culture. And Mr. Cromwell talks about, quote, a toxic culture. And so I find it interesting that in this document that isn't addressed, which makes it look like then simply a PR stunt, a finessing of language, a desire to regain the trust of the public without actually making meaningful change within the inner culture of Hockey Canada. This document doesn't address that. Why?
I didn't write the document, and that's not to excuse myself from anything, Ms. Thomas. What I would say is that's not the case. We have taken this very, very seriously. Justice Cromwell's work is very, very important to us. We've taken a number of steps to be better. We have a number of more steps to be better. And, we need to get to the root cause analysis of the culture of hockey, and we're going to do that. And so what I can say is we have a lot of work to do. We've consulted with experts, and we have a lot more to do, as I've mentioned. And so that's our commitment to Canadians, and we have a lot to do to move forward and be the organization, again, that people expect from us, because we can do that, but we do need help.
30 seconds.
I'm just going to jump in here, Madam Chair. Mr. Nicholson, the rumors are big in hockey. I know because Graham James' rumors long surfaced before he was charged. You talked about 2003 rumors. We've heard those rumors before. When does Hockey Canada have to act on those rumors? Because in most cases, the rumors are true. In the case of Graham James, and now 2003.
10 seconds, please.
Thank you for the question. It's a very delicate one, Kevin. You can't jump on it too much because it's a rumor, but do your homework quickly. Try to get to those sources and get the real valid information so that you can. I think moving quickly is really important. But you have to be careful with that, Kevin, because I've been around hockey as you have. There's a lot of rumors that aren't true, and we have to be cautious of that.
Thank you. That's the end of that round. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to the final questioner, and it's going to be shared between Anthony Housefather and Chris Biddle. Please be mindful that you do only have 5 minutes to share, beginning with Mr. Housefather.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm going to be quick. I just want to come back to the question I had previously asked Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin, I understand that you're not the person that writes the financials. I wanted to just, again, point out that the way the financials are currently worded, it says that the National Equity Fund is being used for accidents and injuries involved in sanctioned hockey activities. Would you agree with me that whatever happened in that hotel room in London in 2018 was not a sanctioned hockey activity?
It was not a sanctioned hockey activity. It was an activity that was not part of our hockey teams, and it was a celebration for a number of teams that achieved great accomplishments and other individuals. So, yes.
Basically, you would agree with me then that the published financials are misleading as to what this fund actually does and doesn't do. And I appreciate if you take that back to the people in finance, Mr. Cairo and the others who are writing these documents. So I'll pass it over to Mr. Biddle.
Thank you so much, Mr. Housefather. Mr. Nicholson, in your knowledge, can you advise how many times Hockey Canada required an NDA for any of its players under its umbrella?
Under its players, that's a real good question, Chris. There may have been under the women's Olympic team in 2014. They may have been asked. I'm not sure if any were signed. Other than that, I don't know of any other situations with any of our national teams being asked to sign NDAs.
Mr. Nicholson, Mr. McLaughlin, I was hoping that you could table with the committee and go back through the records of Hockey Canada how many times Hockey Canada has used an NDA with its players and for what purpose and in what years.
Thanks, Mr. Biddle. I will take that back to the organization.
Thank you so much. I guess we all have concern with the culture of hockey, and I guess that was made abundantly clear that really no change, having watched what the NHL is doing with, or has done with Mitchell Miller, I believe the Boston Bruins specifically, that an organization that saw players, saw the vile nature of his activity, still tried to let them play despite the fact there was a noted history. And I turn back to our own national team and the pride that Canadians have in it. And if this is still the culture in hockey at the highest level, what is it going to take for Hockey Canada to say no to our players? I appreciate the pressure to have the best team on the ice, but if at the highest levels they're still putting players in that shouldn't be there, what will it take? Because I don't think anyone's seen any consequences from what happened in London. What will it take for Hockey Canada to prohibit a player from from wearing the maple leaf and representing Canada?
Is that for me, Mr. Biddle?
Yes, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, in the first hearing in June, I want to say it was Mr. Waugh, but if I'm giving him undue credit, that's okay. But the suggestion was to compel our players as part of our code of conduct to moving forward that they would be participate without question if there was ever an incident or alleged incident again. And so we've made that commitment. And I think Mr. Waugh was you that said the example, we cannot have someone that when their career is done to continue to move forward as a coach or an official or in any other capacity. So we've made that commitment. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Biddle, we have a lot of work to do from an education perspective and others. And so that's really where we are, I would say.
Thank you so much. And so you'll agree with me, because there's different levels of burdens of proof, and the criminal level beyond a reasonable doubt, we've all heard it. And there's a different level for civil responsibility on the balance of probability. So if a player probably was involved, will you commit to this committee that involved in actions like this, like Mr. Miller, like what happened in 2019, they will not be wearing the maple leaf and be on ice for Team Canada?
I'm not going to speak for the NHL, but I think our position is very clear. No.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Biddle.
Oh, okay. Mr. Nicholson, having seen what the Boston Bruins have done, are you concerned that at the highest level that hockey hasn't or isn't learning its lesson, or is this an isolated lesson or isolated incident from a different organization you're not involved with?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Chris, for the question. I look at how the National Hockey League responded to the situation in Boston. I look at what the National Hockey League has been doing for the last number of months, last year and a half, in fact, in regards to these situations. They're taking it very seriously. I'm not going to comment on what the Boston Bruins do. They are their organization. But I can tell you that it's a top priority. I was at the last Board of Governors meeting, and a good part of the Board of Governors meeting was a discussion on this type of situation. So it is being addressed at the highest level of the National Hockey League for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. That comes to the end
point of order.
Our session.
Point of order.
Can you say your name, please?
Mr. Julian.
Yes, Peter.
Could we provide 45 seconds to each party for a closing statement or question?
I think we could, but you guys are going to have to be disciplined and stick to your time. All right. What about 30 seconds?
Sure.
Because I don't know if the clerk can tell us if we have extra time, or do we have to have a hard stop at 1 o'clock?
We began the meeting at 11:03, and we are allowed 2 full hours, which would allow us to go to 1:03.
So, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we shall begin, and I will begin with the Conservatives for a 30-second statement. Thank you.
Well, if it wasn't for the sponsorships pulling out of the men's hockey program, I don't think we would have got here today. The nearly $24 million that has been pulled since June has brought us to this situation. Thank you to Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Nicholson. I think since June, July, September, this was probably our best meeting. We didn't get a lot of answers, but we did get some, like Navigator and so on. But I think those watching today want to see a lot more from Hockey Canada and the National Hockey League, and we can't wait to get cleared up on 2003 and 18. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. And we go to Mr. Whomever for the Liberals.
It's Anthony, Madam Chair. I'll take it. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Nicholson. I found that their testimony today was refreshingly frank comparatively to previous testimonies from Hockey Canada. I think this is good progress. I think this committee and the media have worked together with Canadians to effect change, and I think that I agree with Mr. McLaughlin. Now we need to all work together, including the executive team and the new board at Hockey Canada, to make sure that the culture has changed, that the organization is sustained, and that young kids across Canada can enter hockey programs with they feeling confident and parents feeling confident that this is not only one of our national sports, but a great sport and a safe sport to be part of. And I look forward to that day.
Thank you, Mr. Housefather. And I go to Mr. Lemire. I'm sorry, could you please turn off your mic on the floor? Please mute the floor. Thank you. Mr. Lemire, for 30 seconds, please.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll add my voice to the others. This was a constructive and interesting meeting. And I would like to thank those who will go forward and ensure a safe, healthy sport and make the changes necessary for our young people. Hockey Canada and the incident in 2018 came before this committee, and we want to make sure that this issue is transparent. We want to make sure to shed as much light as possible on these events and to look into recommendations to make sure that nothing of the sort ever happens again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. And now, Peter Julian for 30 seconds, please.
Public confidence over the 6 months that we've been holding hearings so far has completely eroded in Hockey Canada. And it is in part because of stonewalling and a lack of transparency and accountability. Today we got some answers, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for that, including the outrageous funds paid to Navigator. But it is still an issue of accountability. Hockey Canada needs to release, if those victims choose, release them from NDAs, and has to show accountability at all levels. The jury's still out on Hockey Canada. And we will continue, I think, our work to ensure that Hockey Canada, as a national sports organization that represents our national winter sport, provides the transparency and accountability that is so necessary to Canadians having confidence again in the organization.
Thank you, Peter. Now, I think we have come to about 1 more minute left before we adjourn this meeting, and I would like to actually echo what the members have been saying, of the members of this committee. My job as a chair is to talk about the integrity of the process of the standing committee, and I would say that this is probably the first meeting when we did get some clear answers to the questions. And so I want to thank the witnesses, but I would like to say that it is, in fact, clear that this is the first time, and we still have not had assurances of change and transparency and accountability. But I want to thank the witnesses for being patient. I want to apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully they will not happen again. And I want to thank everyone. And so, without further ado, this meeting is now adjourned. And thank you again.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair.